candidate does not check all the boxes,
Yeah.
but you hire them anyway.
Yeah. 98% of job listings don't have a candidate ever that crosses them all off. I think that's a feature, not a bug of companies. I think that they can use that list to justify paying you a lower rate.
Hey, I'm Kevin Landucci with Apply Pass. This is Offertown, the show where engineers learn how to get better offers and become better engineers, while laughing as often as possible. Our guest today, Joe Karlsson, data expert, database expert. He's going to teach us a bunch of tips and tricks about how to better utilize data in interviews and on-the-job performance. If you haven't subscribed already, do so you don't miss out on more content like this. Hope you like it. Hello, everyone. I am honored to announce our guest today. He's a senior data engineer, developer advocate, ex-MongoDB. He's interviewed a bunch of engineers, worked for a slew of database companies. His homeland is cold, but his TikToks are spicy. He's a master of tutorials, a teacher of engineers, a purveyor of entertainment, and whip sharp wit. Joe Karlsson!
Woo! Yay! You just got me hyped up for myself. Wow, I got to do that in the mirror every morning. Yeah.
If you had to sum up who you are in a tweet length, what would you say?
Oh my God. 140 characters or 280? Or what's the new one? I don't know.
Let's go.
I am a data expert who loves code, helping people not mess up their data.
For your last job search, you got 4 job offers.
Yeah.
What would be a practical tip for how people can decide between multiple offers?
Usually the juiciest tea comes out with doing a one-on-one with a peer. I can think of a couple companies I've talked to that I've like noped out of after talking to people, and they're like straight up just like telling you like this, our boss is kind of a micromanager.
I think part of your mission is to debunk the myth of being a genius lone programmer.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm not a smart man. I prefer, I call them like Ricks, like from Rick and Morty. Like, I just don't want to hire a Rick. I don't want to I would rather have a couple dummies who are like super nice and like asking dumb questions and like are able and willing to learn it than like one 10x asshole genius programmer.
Boom. That's a great line.
Yeah, no Ricks, no assholes is kind of the goal.
0.1x developers, you have a ton of expertise in the data world, and NoSQL versus SQL is one of the hot debated topics in a system design interview.
Yes.
What is a rule of thumb that you have, maybe a non-obvious rule of thumb that you have for which one to pick?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a broad thing. Other opinion too on that is like, the line between the two is getting more and more blurred every single year. Right. Which I think is a good thing. I think Postgres is picking up, like you can now do, like, I mean, you've been able to do this forever, but you can do JSON blob storage in a PostgreSQL database, which is basically just a document database like MongoDB. Right. You could do data warehousing with Postgres. You could do pretty much anything with or you can make like a key value store, even if you want an index on your key, and like you can pretty much do whatever you want to do with a NoSQL type database with a regular relational database. I mean, I worked at MongoDB, so like a part of that too, there's a lot of misconceptions around it. It's like how secure it was and its ability to do joins. And I think a lot of that, like a lot of the criticisms of NoSQL databases have already been addressed. Like you can do transactions on a MongoDB database now. You can plug in different like query engines on the back end for different types of use cases. A lot of it's been solved.
When you were at MongoDB, did that culture bleed into the interview? Because you're a NoSQL database shop. So if somebody in an interview said, we should use a SQL database here, would that be a red flag to some interviewers?
It wouldn't be. I would ask why, and because I never shit on anyone's tech choices, but like if I didn't understand that choice, I think I would ask why before I judged it. If someone made like a weird choice, like, I don't know, for example, they're using MongoDB vanilla for data warehousing, that would be like, oh, that's kind of a weird choice. That's expensive. It's slow. It's not optimized for doing complex queries and aggregations. Like, okay, maybe why? Like, I don't know if I would have made that, but like maybe there's a reason there. If they give a bad reason for it, even that's okay too. I don't know. I've worked for companies too where you're getting onboarded and there's just a ton of insane tech debt, and maybe like it was built like 10 years ago and everyone that built it left and no one actually remembers why they built it anymore, but you're still maintaining it because it's too expensive to get off of it.
Going back to like system design interviews. So one thing is, even you've talked about this before, like finding a niche is usually a good thing to do in the job search nowadays. And one niche, for example, that's often overlooked by software engineers that are job searching is something like really knowing the intricacies of how data indexes work.
Yeah.
No matter what kind of engineer you are.
Yeah.
What's a tip or a resource or a mental model that helped you along the way to really understand how indexes work?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is like, the hard part, again, the database world, everyone loves a performance test, and indexes are always a part of that too. The hard part is that a lot of times it's like comparing apples to oranges. And the thing I always write about when I'm writing about performance testing, different indexing strategies, is that it depends on your unique schema and specific use case and what you're querying and what your data storage model looks like. The only way to know is to test. And I think a general rule of thumb, if you're evaluating different index strategies for the thing you're working on, is you have to understand that every vendor is going to have their performance be, or their database be the most performant database in whatever thing they're testing. I've never, ever once in my life ever seen a vendor have a performance test where they lose. And I think that's important to keep in mind when you're like trying to evaluate how to increase the speed of, so if you're like evaluating a specific database or whatever, I think you're a little safer if you're like already using a database and you're trying to evaluate different index methods. Those tend to be less vendor skewed. But if you're evaluating like new infrastructure, and the only way to know is to test yourself, which kind of sucks. The nice part is though, like a lot of cloud-based infrastructure, particularly in data world, is they usually have free trials or like free stuff, and they can usually work with a sales team to try to like get it out. But like trying to like run performance tests with your exact data workload or like projected data workload is the only way to actually fully know.
What are like 1 to 3 common pitfalls by candidates that you can think of in data engineering interviews?
Okay, I'm not hiring anyone right now, but if I was hiring someone in 2024, I think the biggest thing I would be looking for, and I think this can apply to like full stack engineering, but data engineering in particular, I think it's true. But it's one of the biggest things I see is not enough knowledge about how the business works and how your job relates to helping the business. I think with the zero interest rate era, a lot of software engineering was, we got up our asses a lot on just like the tech stack and making resume driven development and like doing microservices for the sake of microservices, or doing like massively over engineered solutions for things that maybe didn't need to be. Showing that you care about how to either like grow revenue for a company or save a company money is going to have a big impact. I think a big trend I'm seeing too is like companies reeling in their cloud infrastructure costs a lot. And I do think like the system design and like optimizing, like techniques for optimizing costs, I think is a big skill to have this year. So in data engineering in particular, let's see, if you're running like massive queries, I think I just saw on Hacker News the other day, someone ran like a $12,000 Snowflake query on accident. They forgot to set a timeout on it, and it ended up running for like 48 hours over the weekend. It came back on Monday and it was still running, and then they got the bill for it, and it was like, oh my god. Yeah, for real. Yeah, but even like saving data, like how do you save data in a cheap way? How are you leveraging cold storage for historical data?
And be upfront about it. Go into the interview ready to talk about that. Have a few statistics that you can say from your back pocket, like this is how I've saved costs. It's always important. People have been talking about that for forever, but right now it's like the value of it is like doubled in an interview.
I agree.
A challenge in the world of a data engineer that affects the business is taking accurate requirements from stakeholders.
Yes.
Classic problem.
Yes.
So if you're in an interview, what would be a keen answer or keen approach that they could have to taking requirements accurately from stakeholders?
The biggest thing I see is people asking what they want to build, but you should be asking like why they want to build something.
Nice.
So I'm looking for like why type questions. You know what I mean? Like Yeah, I want machine learning. I want you to build a machine learning model to detect fraud for all of our e-commerce transactions. Okay, like, but like, what are we trying to solve here? And again, could we use a linear regression? Could basic SQL queries work for this? Like, maybe you don't actually need that. And then the other thing I would look for too, and something I've done too, is like, okay, and then running cost models on it too. Like, if we need to spin up a feature store for machine learning features, okay, we can do that, but here's the cost and here's the time estimate, how long it's going to take, and then also ongoing maintenance for that feature. This is what that's going to look like, and kind of weighing out the pros and cons. So like trying to see what their timeline is, speed, and then like try to figure out, making sure all the stakeholders are on board with like what that actual solution means, if that's truly what they want.
That's beautiful. Trimming it down if possible, learning what's possible there, learning about the boundaries in terms of resources and time.
Yeah.
And really finding out what the reason underneath what they're saying is.
Exactly. And then making sure that they understand the consequences of that as well. Like something I've seen too is a lot of companies want to use open source software, which is great. It's free. But the reason why it's free is because you have to pay for all of the personnel to set up and run all that work. So it's like, I've been in sales calls too, where like we're selling a solution and it's a managed service, and like they're like, oh, but like Apache blah 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 is totally free. Okay, yes, true, but like you're gonna have to hire 2 infrastructure people. You're gonna have to hire an administrator to like actually run the queries on that.
Hidden costs. Showing
Exactly.
them the consequences of what they're doing is probably it might be the hardest part, because the typical engineering brain, conflict avoidant. What you're doing is someone is saying, hey, when this fucks up, this is what's going to happen. But
exactly.
A great approach to that is like, you can do that, but X will happen.
I always say that. Yeah, I'm like, yes, we can do that, but like, here's what this is. Or like, the other thing I do too is I give up a menu and be like, okay, we get to, here's what these are. Here's like the cost of each of these, and like you can pick 2 or 3 of these, or like this is going to impact the deadline of this feature. This is my estimate for how long it's going to do this. And cheaper solutions tend to be more time intensive, which is more money intensive in engineering hours.
Let's say you have a candidate walk in. The candidate does not check all the boxes, but you hire them anyway.
Yeah.
What do they showcase that made you want to hire them?
98% of job listings don't have a candidate ever that crosses them all off. And I think that's a feature, not a bug of companies. I think that they can use that list to justify paying you a lower rate because you don't check off all the boxes. So I actually think it's on purpose.
But your take is that companies are putting a slew of things on the requirements so that you don't have 3 of them, and then I can say, oh, well, that's a 10%.
Exactly. Yeah, because a lot of times your pay rate is based on your technical proficiency level, and they'll you'll get a couple of technical interviews, and they'll knock you off a couple points for not being an expert in some weird or like some niche tech that you haven't used before that they use. So that's
best conspiracy I've never heard of, and I agree 100%. Even if they're not
unpopular opinion.
Even if they're not doing it on purpose, it's still an effect.
Yeah, exactly.
How is this not one of the biggest problems in modern data engineering, that the fight you will be having forever is the tension between fulfilling OKRs and new initiatives versus tackling
tech debt,
updating legacy code?
Yeah. I feel like it's going to get worse. I feel like there's going to be more there's being more pressure on teams to do more with less today than there ever was. And that means dealing with tech debt is going to be the lowest bar. I still do look for companies who are dealing with that and like have spend 20% of their time dealing with tech debt. It depends what they're doing. And I put that into my estimates too, as a negotiation tactic too. Like, we can do this, but this is the impact and this is what it's going to take to fix that impact.
Right.
Yeah, I've worked for companies where like we have to deliver something really quickly and we can do it, but like it's shitty and not scalable, and it's brittle, and it needs a little bit of work to get it actually like scalable.
It's like the business will probably never care about these things. And
no,
it's engineers' kind of like duty to argue and fight for fixing that.
Exactly.
What's like one learning from the recent reading that you've been doing just on this like kind of new world that you're opening up?
So for example, like I've been digging into the nuts and bolts of like BigQuery recently. Like, how is it doing distributed? Like, how is it splitting up data? Like, how BigQuery works, it has a bunch of compute nodes, and it coalesces a bunch of stuff together, and then it joins all these different nodes together. It allows it to be like super scalable, but like So you can spin up the queries to handle as much data as you want. It doesn't have to live on one disk. It's cheaper to scale than, like a vertical stored query engine like a PostgreSQL.
The most important data engineering question: should commas in SQL be leading or trailing? What's the best way, Joe, and why?
For me, the answer is it depends. It depends. Like whatever your team does, you should totally do. But that being said, I do them trailing. I feel like it makes more sense to put them at the end because it feels more human readable, like a sentence. To like read, like select, where, group by,
Yeah, it's like left to right reading. It would be on the right. Yeah.
Also, the other thing too for tech debt too, if you have to add additional lines to that SQL, if you add it to the end, it makes it easier to add a new line.
Okay, what is a problem that data engineers encounter often that not enough people care about, but everybody should?
Data engineers get asked to put screenshots of Excel tables or graphs into PowerPoint presentations a lot. I think management wants to be more data driven, but they're stuck on Excel spreadsheets. And I think that doesn't necessarily work in the big data, real-time data world. One of the biggest things is just trying to make data more accessible. So the key is like figuring out what your boss wants and needs and then trying to figure out how to best create a platform that can give them that as easily as possible. Self-service as much as possible.
I like your Rexis post. Who has, if you can only pick one best Rexis out there, who has the one best Rexis?
Ooh.
Just one. You have to pick. No, it depends. You just pick one.
What's the best recommendation? I don't know. Man, this might be basic too, but TikTok is the best in my opinion. I think the reason they're like, I don't think this is even an unpopular opinion, but like they are, I mean, they get more data than any other recommendation engines, particularly for video. Like Netflix, it takes 30 minutes to 2.5, 3 hours to like watch a movie. Like the amount of data they're getting is so much smaller than what Netflix or than what TikTok's getting. They're getting like data recommendations every, 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds. So they're just able to get a lot more data more quickly on you. And it's shocking. Like I remember when my dad signed up for TikTok and like he didn't get it. And the weird part about TikTok is like, it shows you crappy videos at the very beginning, but it learns so quickly what you want. Like it's like he didn't get it. He was getting like dancing teen videos and whatever when he first started, but then it like started narrowing in on his like pickleball interests and that sort of thing. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know how they did it. But even without an account, they like pinned him down so quickly. Can I say one that I think is worse?
Absolutely.
Spotify. I feel like Spotify and Amazon suck at trying to give you new stuff. Like if I search for like toasters and I buy a toaster, Amazon recommends more toasters. Like no, and then like Spotify, I feel like I used to be so good at discovering new music, and now it just gives me the same stuff I always listen to, and it's like that's not how I listen to music, and that's not how I want to listen to music.
Not a recommendation. That's just a repeat.
Yeah, I know. And they're like, you've been listening to a lot of this recently, and it's like, yes, because you keep forcing it down my throat, and I'm over it. It's like I have all the time where it's like Spotify thinks I like an artist and I hate them and I can't get it off because you can't do the thumbs down and you can't dislike a song anymore that's recommended. So it's like there's no way for me to tell it that I don't want it besides just skipping it 15 times in a row.
But Spotify Wrapped is great.
I do love Spotify Wrapped. I know. I am considering switching to Apple Music.
Oh my God, Joe, are you serious?
I know. I feel like Apple Music is the Android of music streamers. Spotify is somehow the Apple, and somehow Apple's own music streaming service has become the Android of music streamers. And I'm thinking, I don't know. Anyway,
so this is the hiring deck of hootenanny. What's the craziest story you've heard about onboarding?
Honestly, a crazy story for onboarding for me would be one that was a good experience. Someone having a good experience of onboarding. I think with the current, I think it's going to get worse too. Like every company has shit onboarding. Everyone wants to hire seniors because they don't have any onboarding. And I think that it's going to get worse as tech layoffs get worse. Documentation's just going to tank. There's going to be none. And the people who are like actually understand how the system works are going to be leaving. or just they're just gone. They're fired, their team got purged or whatever. So I think it's going to get worse, which is unfortunate. So I think if you're a candidate, the thing I always try to do too is try to document all the stuff I didn't know and try to like make a wiki or improve the wiki or at least update it with the new information. I always feel like it gets like thrown out the wayside as you're trying to get shuffled on and get it.
What's the zaniest thing you've seen a candidate say or do in an interview?
I can't say who this person was, or what the company they're working for, but they were interviewing a candidate and he kept talking about his Brazilian wife in the interview.
Okay.
And they're like, what the hell is this? And then they get out the interview and so she's telling a coworker about this. And it turns out this was, I think it's Colton from 90 Day Fiance. He was like interviewing for a software engineering position. I don't even know if she's, but he didn't end up getting the position. She had no idea who he was, but like the whole time he just spent like making references to his Brazilian wife.
Or just
he's just like, my Brazilian wife does blah blah blah. She's making this for dinner. Like okay, this is like, let's get back to the whiteboard. That's fine. It's just like a weird, which like good for him. I'm like, reality TV star. Go out and try to get like,
he's excited
get
about
some work. He loves his Brazilian wife.
Last one. What's the fastest tank you've seen in an interview? Like an instant rejection.
Oh, the worst. I've seen this. I've done this. I've seen this happen with so many candidates personally. But if you're in a whiteboard situation and you just freeze up, that's like the worst. I feel like I've been in situations where I don't know the answer to a whiteboarding interview, but like that doesn't matter. Like the point is to talk it through and ask questions. Like even when I'm stuck on stuff, it's like asking the interview for like help or tips or like explaining what I don't know, or like you need that. It's unfortunate, but I think the instant no is always like when someone just completely shuts down. Because for me, that's like a bad sign that they're just going to like shut down and not ask questions if I hire them and they're trying to learn something they don't know.
Yeah.
But if they can at least like articulate and ask what they don't know,
if you're able to say what you're struggling with and why.
Exactly.
Yeah. The next game is called the Lord of Hiring. So, dear Lord of Hiring, that's you, Joe. You're the Lord of Hiring.
Oh!
We heard that you decided to improve the tech industry. What did you decide to do to improve the tech industry?
Oh. As Lord of the tech industry for life, dictator for life of the tech industry. Okay, I'm going to come at this from a dev perspective. I think we need regulation on the tech industry, particularly on LLMs. I think we need it around like content protection. I'd love some more transparency in the space. This also may be controversial. I also think with the tech layoffs, I feel like tech workers need to start thinking about unionizing. I feel like any industry that has massive volatility and massive control for management becomes more stable with unionizing. I feel like we wasted our opportunity of having unions when we had a lot of power a couple of years ago, and now we're in a position where we probably could have used them. And I know a lot of tech workers are afraid of unions, but it's unfortunate. I think that could help everybody to do it. So yeah, I would require. I don't know if I require, but I would encourage more workers to start thinking about unionizing their workspaces.
Yes. Interviewers, from now on, you will blank.
The number one thing I hate about technical interviewers is when they think that this one specific niche knowledge they understand and know is the most important thing about being a software engineer. And if you don't know it, you're dumb. But I hereby ban all software engineers from asking niche technical questions about the ins and outs of their specific job, and then banishing candidates from the interview process for that. Gone. No
Last
more.
One. This is the rapid fire round. What is a controversial opinion you feel strongly about, aka Joe Karlsson? What hill would you die on?
I think millennials are the generation best suited to be software engineers.
Why?
I think boomers and silent generation, I think, struggle with tech their whole life. Again, this is a broad generalization. But I think the most interesting part is with Gen Z and Gen Alpha versus millennials. I think that Gen Z and Alpha generations are seen as being more like tech first, but they're like they use like software as a service web apps on an iPad or like Chromebook, and they're not used to like actually troubleshooting software from a core level or understanding it. Like, I feel like millennials came from a generation where nothing worked and we needed to kind of like figure every component out. We were the ones that were troubleshooting everything, but we were also like came about before like all this like stuff happened. Like I grew up in the age of like where you could like edit the HTML and CSS on your MySpace, which is how I first learned how to do web development. And then you just like can't do that anymore. Everything's kind of been stripped away of all its personality, and like you're needing to understand what's happening behind the scenes has kind of gone down. I have a lot of friends who teach college classes and even like do a lot of CS 101 classes, and students struggle with saving as a concept because they're used to Google Docs saving. They don't understand where it goes. The terminal is a challenging concept, which I think is tricky. So I don't know. This may be controversial, but I do think like millennials just like were in a unique position where they had to like solve all these problems from the ground up and like are more digitally savvy than other generations.
Shoot me, but we're digitally savvy.
That's right, exactly.
We have reached the end of the show, and it's the ritual on this show for the guest to do the sign off. So, Mr. Karlsson, you don't have to thank me. Please don't thank me. Just leave the people with one more idea, and then we'll wave goodbye.
Okay, I'm Joe Karlsson. I'm a data engineer, developer advocate, and software engineer. I write content on the internets.com, but if you want YouTube, TikToks, threads, whatever. And one final thought before you go. What should I do? I'm going to say software engineers are basically just digital plumbers. And, we're just kind of hooking up pipes to different services in the cloud these days and different functions. That's fine. We're not the smartest people on earth. That's okay. I think we just need to accept that and kind of get over ourselves. Anyway, that's all for me. Kevin, I said I wanted to end on a positive note, and it ends with me telling everyone to get on
Mario and Luigi.
Exactly.